What is going on, guys? It's Yoji. I'm sitting here with a cup of tea in the morning on the balcony, and I think it is time for another Yoji Rambles. I'm not 100% sure where this will be going, but recently I've thought a lot about some of the comments I've gotten on videos, some of the questions I've tried to figure out how to answer, and that I've not really found an answer to yet. And in this video I'm kinda exploring, trying to understand and condense my thoughts about these types of questions and things players apparently have trouble with in PoE. Now, if this whole video ends up sounding super condescending, it's not meant that way, so please bear with me and see where this train of thought leads us. One question is, what's the budget for this build? How much currency do I need for this build? That's a question that I, for example, get at least once on every single build guide. And I'm never quite sure what to answer, as I make most of my characters from zero and give explanations on how to gear the character throughout various stages of gearing progression, starting with very cheap or even self-found basic leveling and mapping gear and simple to acquire items, up to the endgame setup for all the hard bosses and the highest map tiers. So my budget was 0 chaos orbs, right? Or do they want to know how much it costs to put together the whole character from the get-go? Or maybe the budget to do some specific content? If I then answer, for example, that my endgame fully geared setup was roughly 15 Exalted orbs, for example, including the 6 link and all the items and cluster jewels and whatnot, I would usually get a few responses telling me how they could never afford making this build, or how they wanted a cheap build to finally break into endgame with. But this build apparently isn't it, because it's too expensive, or that they do not play enough to make this much currency. And that left me wondering for quite some time now. I started the build from nothing, getting into endgame, naturally progressing and farming up upgrades. How come it doesn't work for others? Or maybe it does and they just don't try? And the conclusion I came to from helping and talking to some of those viewers I think they have it completely backwards. The people I'm referring to here, and the people I talk to, and maybe you want to think about whether or not this applies to you. Those people believe that you have to first make a ton of currency, to then with that currency make an endgame viable and strong character to do endgame with. And when I look at my gameplay, I realize I do it exactly the other way around. I try to make a decently strong character and break into tier 10 to 12 maps with, usually on a 5 link or tabular, and other easy to get items and super budget gear, and then from there in Trade League I usually try to farm up upgrade after upgrade until I can do tier 16 content. And that actually is where I make most of my currency. I barely make any money before breaking into tier 10 maps usually, but these days you don't even need that much currency to get into tier 10 maps if your build is decent enough. And there are many builds out there nowadays that can do this. And I'm not only talking about the speediest meta builds, I'm talking about super beginner friendly guides and videos and builds that allow anyone to get there. Tier 10, tier 12 maps is not a large hurdle, right? This to me appears to be the main issue, while the people having the issue believe the problem lies elsewhere. From talking to a lot of people, I found, since they believe they are lacking currency to make endgame viable builds, and they know the more you play, the more currency you make. Some players start to believe that because their playtime is much more limited than that of, for example, wealthy streamers, they could never get into and complete Path of Exile's endgame. But then how come many people, for example me myself, can only play a few hours a day and still get to kill Uber Elder or Awakener 8 every single league, after roughly 4 to 6 weeks of playing in the league? There's a video series by a fellow content creator called Balormage. He called it Working Class Exile, where he plays a character from scratch on a new account, not even with stash tabs or any MTX board, and only plays 90 minutes each day on Delirium League. Every single minute he played and did anything on that character is recorded. I will link you the video series below, because I think some of you might be surprised how far he got in 25 days of playing 90 minutes each day. And a lot of people will be surprised about the character he was able to put together in that time frame. Yes, he did play a meta build. Now of course 90 minutes a day is more than some people play, but also less than a lot of people play. So if it isn't time, what are those players missing? I think they either lack game knowledge, or effort, or skill. What do I mean by that? Time is the time spent playing, of course. And I don't mean the time AFK in your hideout, I mean the time actually playing the game. Skill is how good you are at the game, how fast you click through the menus, how effectively you can control your character, stash items between maps to get back into the next map, and just ways to simply get things done faster and better than other players would be able to do with the same character and the same stats. Effort is how hard you try to actually play efficiently. Do you minimize time between maps? Do you go out of your way to maximize returns on investment and make currency? Or do you watch Netflix while playing, chat in your favorite streamer's Twitch chat, or shitpost on Reddit in between maps? Are you even playing an OP build? Or trying to be as off-meta snowflakeish as possible? And lastly, knowledge means, are you doing the right things to further your goals? While effort means how hard you try, skill means how good you do things, knowledge is needed to try hard on the right things, be effective on the things that maximize your value. Not only do things well, but do the correct things well. Not only trying to make the best build, but actually knowing what the best build is, or how to get the most out of a character you are playing. Which content to run, what to buy, what to sell, what to keep, what to use. And different players will naturally gravitate towards different ways to play the game, and be better at some of these aspects than others. I, for example, am able to play PoE for a decent amount of time. More than some people, but definitely a lot less than most of the content creators. My skill is pretty meh. I'm not a total noob, but I navigate the game fairly slowly. And I'm just a boomer trying to play the game without getting RSI. Effort-wise, I try to be efficient while never putting efficiency over my enjoyment of the game. That means I sometimes will knowingly make the suboptimal decisions to have more fun. So I put my effort to be good at the game somewhere in the middle. Lastly, my game knowledge is probably quite a bit over average. And this is definitely my main advantage over your average working class player struggling with endgame. Because I have in the past been able to play PoE full time for a while and have been playing for so long, I simply know a ton of stuff about the ins and outs of the game. Also, I make an effort to stay up to date, as that is needed for content creation. This is my cheeky little advantage that I have over most players that allows me to still stay relevant when it comes to PoE content, while not playing nearly as much as others. And knowledge, in my opinion, is probably the most difficult flaw to identify. You can lack the knowledge to understand that you do in fact lack knowledge. This might be what leads to many people thinking they instead lack time to play. But how do you get more knowledge about PoE? Now there's the crux. For a lot of this, you need time. Time playing the game does help, but as we already identified, you might not have enough time to play a PoE or as much as you'd like to begin with. But I also mean time spent learning about the game. While you maybe cannot play more often, most people could, during the time they cannot play, still read up on PoE facts, listen or watch Path of Exile related content. That's what I do all the time, for example during my breakfast or lunch breaks at work. On my way to work, especially when I used to commute 3 hours a day, I listen to PoE podcasts and theory crafted builds on the train. Or when the kid is busy playing on the playground with other kids and is not interested in playing with me at all anymore, I got some time to sit in the sun and read. And what do I read? Freaking PoE wiki sometimes. So to make more currency, you can of course also check if you maybe want to put in more effort to be time efficient in PoE, or if you want to improve skill wise and practice some speed leveling and racing. All I'm trying to say is that playtime is not the only thing you can invest into getting more out of PoE. And I think that's something a lot of people think is not true. So to sum up my main points, you do not need much currency to get to endgame. Instead, you need to get to endgame to make a ton of currency. At least for me that's the best way. And time is not your only resource when it comes to making currency in PoE. But if you're already here, trying to learn about the game, you might as well subscribe for more Path of Exile content. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters. I'm Yoji, and I will see you with the next cup of tea.